Welcome back, guys. This is going to be a new video. Today we're going to be doing some wiring on the car and adding some new gauges to it. So here I have a Mopar boost gauge. This is a mechanical gauge. It goes up to 35 pounds of boost. It lights up blue. It's a really nice quality gauge, so it's going to match this car very nicely. And then I also do have, this is a Glowshift gauge right here. This is going to be a wideband gauge, so this will measure the air-fuel ratio on the car. That's what this is going to be. This one is a tinted gauge. I'll pull this out here and show you what it kind of looks like. So you can't see anything really with it off. It's not until it actually lights up you'll be able to see it, and it looks pretty neat. So this is a really cool gauge. These are going to be important just because they're vital to showing me what the car is actually doing. I need to know how much boost the car is running because there's a certain PSI that I want this to be at, and too much I can blow the motor, and not enough we're not going to be making the sauce that we want. So that's why that's important. And the AFR, it's also important because it's going to tell me if the car is running too rich or too lean. So in here I also do have a gauge pillar that we're going to be throwing up. So let me sit in here and I'll show you what this is going to look like. This is going to go right over here and set right on this pillar. I will need to form this a little bit better. This is just like a universal one that I got online, pretty cheap. You can buy one specifically for the Dodge, but they're also quite a bit more expensive. They're like 80 bucks or something. So this was probably like 15, and this is just, this should work just fine. My plan is to try and make this work, but we will need to wire in both of these gauges, mount this in here, and get power to them. So we're gonna start with this boost gauge first. We'll just pop this open and see what we have in here. You'll have the gauge itself. Take this out. It looks like you have a little holder thing if you wanted to set it in this. You will be getting this is the vacuum tubing that it comes with, that we're gonna run all the way from the inside of the cab of the car to the engine bay, where we're gonna be teeing into a vacuum port on the intake, I believe. We also do have a bunch of different fittings in here that are going to connect to this, and that's what's going to allow us to connect that to the gauge. And looks like there's some grommet and a couple other pieces in here. And also looks like there's some instructions in here too as well. Now moving on to the wideband gauge. So you're obviously going to have your gauge. We have a little computer module, it looks like, in here. And then we also have a multitude of wiring harnesses that this is going to go to and clip into. Here's the oxygen sensor that gets tied into your exhaust. That's where that's going to go into. And that pretty much completes that kit. Looks like there is possibly some instructions in here too as well. I'm going to start with installing this boost gauge on the car first. So just, my engine bay is an absolute mess right now for some other wiring that I have going on in here. So just bear with me. But the first thing you need to do is figure out where to connect the boost gauge. On this car, I just took a look, and it looks like the spot that I'm going to do is going to be this spot right here. So if you come and find this box on the car, just take this back, follow it down, and you're gonna have this hose right here. So this, you go ahead, disconnect it, pull it off, and you have this little nipple right here that sets on this module. I believe this is the AOS is what this is, the air oil separator. So then, now that this is off right there, it just connects to, if you take this back, you have a clamp right there. So this is what connects to the intake manifold on the car. So we're gonna remove that, pull that off, and basically what we're gonna be doing is replacing this hose, so that way we can tap into it, because this is going to give us a good boost reading because it's coming right off of the intake manifold. This is now off. We'll just go ahead and pull this out of here right there. So there's that back nipple. So these are the two that we're going to have to connect, and then we'll tap it in the middle. For that, what I'm going to use is I picked up some red silicone hose. This is 3/8 or also 10 millimeter in diameter. This will work perfectly fine, and it's what's going to allow us to use a centerpiece to go in between the two and tap into it. Get that on, just slip that over. What we need to do now is we need to cut this somewhere in the middle and add our T-fitting so that way we can tap into it and run our boost line. What I'm going to use as a T in the middle of that hose is a brass pipe T connector. Here is the dimensions, so 1/8 by 1/8 by 1/8. So that's going to be the thread on each one of these sides. And what I have to pair with this is these barbed fittings right here. So this end will thread into the T, and then you have this end which will attach and connect the hose. So this is going to go on both sides of this, and then this third port right here is going to be my tap that I'm going to use to run the vacuum T. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit of Teflon tape to each one of these threads, put this in this side and get another one on the other side, thread these in, tighten these up, and then we'll go ahead and make a cut in here somewhere and we'll connect this in the middle. This is what it looks like completed. This is the look that we have right now. We have enough line. I just would need to put some clamps down on these, tighten these down. Moving on to my actual vacuum line that's going to go right there. So I have the vacuum hose that came out of the boost gauge package. So, and I have the correct fittings here. So this is the fitting. This is going to slide onto this hose first, and then you're going to put this little small bead thing that just fits barely over this tubing. Then you're going to take this right here that has this kind of flared end, and this is going to go into the tubing. You're going to push it in all the way, and then you're going to take this bottom part and slide this over. This is going to bring up that bead to where it needs to go, and then you're going to thread this in here. Go ahead and tighten this down, and this is what's going to secure this hose into here and give you a nice tight air leak fit. I will put a little bit of Teflon tape on this part right here that threads in. I'm not going to on this. I don't think you need it. If that changes, I can go ahead and make an adjustment later, but I believe that that is how this works. We'll just get this nice and snug. Everything is good and ready to go right here as far as the actual boost vacuum line. This just needs to get routed inside of the cab of the car now. So we're gonna have to locate a spot, hopefully somewhere down here on the firewall, that we can route it underneath the dash of the seat and underneath the car. There should be somewhere that has an access point underneath the dash. I have heard previously on the forums when I looked into it that there is not a good spot on the firewall for you to route anything through. Somehow I highly doubt that there's no spot to be able to route this. It just wouldn't make any sense. So we're gonna go ahead, take a look underneath the dash here and see what we can find. Let's take a look up underneath here and see what we got to work with. Okay, I retract my last statement. So there is nowhere underneath this dash that I see that you can wire through. The only spot that there's somewhat of an access is going to be the hood release, which isn't really a spot that we could use. So unless we drill a new spot, which is going to be tough to get to, we're going to have to figure out something for how we're going to be getting both wiring and the boost vacuum hose through the firewall, all the way, route it all the way down here, up through this piece to get into our gauge pillar. So I looked up where an access spot is on the firewall. Looks like a common spot that most people use is going to be this grommet right back in here. This is all the way on the passenger side, so it's kind of way out of the way. I've also seen people run some pretty janky ways of routing this over here just along the fender and through the outside here, in through the door. Don't do that, okay? That looks tacky and it's disgusting. So this is gonna have to go through the firewall over here one way or another. I found a solution for where I'm going to put this wiring in here. If you can see, I have like a ice pick back in there. What that is, or at least where that's poking into, there's a rubber grommet access where all this group and nest of wires goes for the relay box here. But this is just a rubber grommet back in here. So I'll show you what it looks like underneath here so you know what you're looking for. You look up in here. Okay. So you can see you have this is the hood release latch right here. This is what I was talking about earlier. And then if you look above it, right there, so that's that big black grommet piece right there where that nest of the wires comes through. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a slit in that with just like a razor blade. I have a razor blade here. We will go ahead, put a slit in it, and then we're gonna try to open it up on the engine bay side, and that should open it up enough to where we can finally send some wires through and also get this part through right here. So we're all the way through now. This is done. I still will need to wire a power source also through that same hole. If we take a look at the gauge, there's going to be 2 tabs on the back of this, and you can see this one right here says 12 volts, so this will go to a positive source, and then this one over here is going to go to your negative source, and then you're going to need some tabs to put onto these so that way they just slide on and off. I will need to get some wire in order to do that. Apparently it's too much to ask for Mopar to put any wiring in the box for us to wire this up with, so I'm gonna have to fab up my own wires. This is my 18 gauge wire. I'm gonna have just a red one that I'm gonna use. This will be for the positive, obviously, and then black will be negative. For my positive source, I know that I'm gonna be having to run this back through the firewall the same way that I had that wire come through. And this is gonna go all the way to my fuse box up in the engine bay, and then it's also going to travel up here into the gauge, where the gauge is gonna set right up here. And then for my ground wire, looks like I did find one spot that I can ground it underneath the dash down here, just so I don't have to route it super far. Looks like there was one spot right back there, so there's a bolt right there. I'm gonna try grounding it to that. Both my wires routed. I have my ground wire going right there. I think that'll work out just fine. And then I also do have my power wire right here. I did change this up to green in color. I just wanted to change things up a little bit. Now we're just gonna take them, route them up through the side right here. So we're gonna pop this cover off. Just take a flathead screwdriver, get behind this. There's just a couple of clips that just push on, and then we'll figure out routing our wire underneath the back side of this and get it up to here. Taking a look at this now, what I'm actually gonna do next is go ahead and remove this undercover piece right here, get this out of the way so I can take a look in here a little bit better. There's 2 7mm bolts, one here and one right here. Once those are taken out, then this piece should just unclip. One more bolt underneath on the bottom side of this dash too. Feels like it's right over here on this side. I have both of my wires routed all the way up through the side over here, and I was able to tuck them in very nicely to this trim over here. So I have the positive and the negative, have terminals that are crimped onto each one of these. These will just slide right into my gauge. The gauge is hooked up, so as soon as we throw the key in and turn this ignition on, this should go ahead and light up, and it should operate and function. So we'll give it a go here. Just like that. So it did light up, tells me that we do have power to this gauge, and it is working properly. All right, so I'm gonna take a moment just to go over the other gauge on this. But it's pretty simple to actually hook up. So if you take it from one end to the other, it should be a lot easier. So the first thing you need to establish is going to be the oxygen sensor. So this is what I'll show you where this is going to go. This is what's going to hook into your exhaust on the car. Preferably this is going to go after your catalytic converter, or I guess it just depends. But so this is going to go into your exhaust on the car. This downpipe on this car does not have a spot for this, so you could either drill this out and weld a bung in order to thread this into. So this is threaded. If you pull this part off right there, it's threaded, and that's what that would thread into. So once that's threaded in, this will be able to read what your air fuel ratio is. I need to swap over. I have a different downpipe on my other car that I'm going to swap over onto this one, that has a spot set up to run this right in this location right here. So that's going to be the plan once I do swap that over. Right now, I'm just getting this gauge set up so that way when I do swap it over, all I gotta do is just thread this in and then we're done. From this, you can see it has a harness on the other end. This harness is going to connect to this wiring harness right here. It's this bigger one. This is what clicks into that. So once you have these two connected, then this piece is going to go to your little module box here. So this is, this does have some labels on it that does make things a little bit easier. So the one that says sensor right here on this side, it's got this port. This is what's going to click into this harness right there. So that clips into there. And then from here, you have your two other harnesses left. So you'll have this one right here. So this is going to go directly to your gauge. It has the two clips on it. One goes directly into here, clicks in, and the other one will route directly to your gauge. And then for getting your power, that's going to be what your last cable here is for. And that's what all these loose end connectors right here go to. So you'll have to wire these into your different power sources, so that way you can get power to this whole system here. And then this little harness clips into this last little port on this box right there. And down here, it'll tell you what the colors go to. So red wire is going to be a constant source. Your white wire, this is going to be an ignition source, so power when you turn the switch on. Black is going to be a ground source, and then orange is going to be an optional switched headlight. So when the headlights turn on, the gauge will light up brighter. I have my main big wire coming all the way to right here. This is just where the harness is ending. This is where I'm leaving it. This is going through the firewall. I was able to fit that harness through that same spot that I used. So I'll take you inside now of the cab. This will click right into that top one right here. I also do have the gauge, the wire that actually goes up to the gauge. I have this snake through the same spot that I did my other wires over here. Lastly is the power wire. So for that, this is the one harness that has all the colors that you will need to tap into and wire in yourself. So this last clip will just plug right in there again. So I'm just going to show you real quick how I wired in the module box for my gauge here. So there's 4 wires. I'm only using 3 out of the 4. This orange one right here, we're not using it. For this white wire, so what I did was I tapped both of my wires into my existing gauge that I just installed. So this green wire, this is the switched positive, this matches, and this was going to go to the white wire on my harness here. And then the black wire, this is your ground. I just tapped that into my ground wire that I just did. The 12 volt, this is a constant power source. So this is the one that I'm still waiting on. This is going to need to get tapped to a source that's always giving power off. And what we're going to do for that is there's a fuse box right underneath the dash here, right back in there. We're just going to do a little bit of testing. And once we find a constant power source, then we can use a mini fuse tap and we'll just wire that right into. So I have this red wire now hooked up. I have this end crimped that goes into the harness. And then over here, I just have this end loosely setting in that little butt connector, just to make sure that this works before we do completely crimp this down and secure it. So right now, since everything is hooked up the way that it needs to be, if we turn the key in, we should see our AFR gauge now light up. This one we already tested. This one works. It's awesome. It's good. So let's go ahead, turn this key on, and we should get some power as soon as we turn this switch on here. Still not seeing anything Let me go ahead and I'll look at the wiring again, make sure everything is correct, and go from there. All right, guys, so I'm having issues. It's not wanting to turn on. I've already tested it, checked the wires. We're getting power to this gauge. The ground seems to be fine because it's the same ground that's running this top one right here. So it makes no sense why it's not working on this. I've wired it up accordingly with the instruction manual here, exactly how they wanted you to wire everything. So it's possible that it may be a faulty gauge. That's the only thing I'm thinking of right now at this point. Additionally, for this boost gauge, I did forget to mention, but don't forget to do it. You're going to want to run your vacuum line that you have in the engine bay. Go ahead and route that all the way up through your pillar here, out to where your gauge is going to be. And then on the back side here, you'll need that fitting that comes in the kit. So I have the fitting right here. It's the same exact setup as the one in the engine bay. So we're going to go ahead, thread the vacuum on this, and then we'll tighten this down onto the back side of the gauge right down here. Be careful that you don't have any kinks in this line, otherwise you are going to get incorrect and false readings. So I am trying to install one of the Glowshift tinted AFR gauges in my car, and I'm having issues with the gauge actually turning on. I'm working on trying to figure out what's going on with my wideband air fuel ratio gauge down here. I'm not able to get power to it. I have everything hooked up. This is clipped in here, this switch is, and basically everything goes to the module box. What I'm doing right now is I'm testing this directly onto the battery. So I have, if we come out here, a couple of wires that I'm plugging in directly to the battery. I just extended some wire out here. So the black, this is grounded, and then they said to connect both the red wire and the white wire. So this is your constant and your switched ignition source, both to the positive side of the battery, and your gauge should come on. So this is how they test them. So I'm just giving myself some just test wires here, and I'm gonna go ahead and plug these into the positive, and we'll see if we get power or not. If we do not have power, then we likely have either a faulty gauge or a faulty module. I know that we're getting power to the actual gauge itself, so I don't know why this isn't turning on other than a faulty gauge. So after talking with Glowshift for this gauge right here, it sounds like they're not willing to warranty it because it's past the warranty expiration date. So I had to end up buying a new gauge. So I have a new gauge for this on the way. It's going to be the same exact gauge, but hopefully that'll take care of the issue, and this new gauge will be warranted. So other than that, we're kind of just waiting for that, but these gauges are going to be done. So I'll just end up wiring this the way that it was, the correct way, underneath the dash here, and we'll deal with hiding all these wires later. But that is going to be a wrap for the gauge install.